Hey guys, today we're doing lesson 7.7. We're going to start today's lesson with talking through a couple vocabulary words. So as you look at your notes page, you'll notice that the vocab words are already filled in with the definition, but it's important that we understand what these definitions mean. So why don't you pause the video and take just a minute to read through the definitions on this first page. All right, so interest, there's two situations that normally you would receive interest. So if you put money into the bank, the bank will then pay you interest for letting them borrow your money. So in that situation, you'd want a high interest rate. So if you put $100 in the bank, it might be that after a year, you actually have $102 or $103 in that account, and that $2 or $3 would be what's called interest. Also, if you take out a loan, so if you have to buy something really big like a house or a car or go to college and you borrow a loan, then you have to pay interest on that loan. In that case, you'd want a low interest rate, because if I borrow $30,000 to buy a car, I don't want to have to pay that much interest on it, but at the end, I'm going to end up paying the bank back more than $30,000 because I have to pay interest on what I owed. So that's what interest is. Principal, this is different than like the middle school principal down the hallway. A principal in this situation is the amount of money that is started with, that's originally deposited or originally borrowed. Simple interest is what we'll be looking at today, and that's the interest that's earned just based on what the principal was to start with. That's different than compound interest, which was your definition at the bottom of the page, which is actually what happens, that you earn compound interest. So you earn, if you put $100 in the bank, at the end of a year, you might have $103, and then the next year, you might earn more than $3 worth of interest because you earn interest based on $103, not just $100. So the interest compounds, it grows on itself, which is why you maybe have had people in your life tell you that you want to put money in the bank at an early age and start saving so that it can build more and more interest the longer that it's in there. But we're going to be just solving today for simple interest, just based on what was originally put in, because it's a much simpler equation to start with. And then the other vocab word here is the annual interest rate. That's where the percent comes into play. So the interest rate is the percent of interest that you're earning. And the last word is the balance, and we use A to stand for account balance, not B, so it's A for account balance, and that represents the amount of money that's in your bank account after a period of time. So if you put $100 in and you get $3 worth of interest, then your account balance would be $103. So let's go ahead and go to the next page and start looking at some examples. All right, so you can read through that paragraph at the top of the page if you want to pause your video. It sort of talks through the things that I just spoke about. But really where we want to draw our attention right now is the box in the middle of the page that says the simple interest formula. And you might want to put a little star next to that, because this is the formula that we are going to be using over and over again. I equals PRT, where I stands for the interest, P stands for the principal, that's what you start with, R stands for the rate, which is where the percent will come into play, and T stands for the time, and time is always based in years, and that will be important in just a minute. And so the amount of interest that you earn is based on how much money you put in, what the interest rate is, and how long you leave it there. So example 1 says a $2,000 bond, that's a type of investment, earns 3% simple interest per year on its purchase price. Find the interest earned after 5 years. So I'm trying to calculate the interest. I'm going to multiply the principal, that's what I start with, so in this case that's 2,000. The rate, which is 3%, and the time, which is 5 years. Now, before I multiply 2,000 times 3 times 5, I need to convert that percent into the value that it actually is. Remember, 3% does not have the value of 3, because it's actually here 3 over 100. That's the value of 3%. And so this would be 2,000 times 0.03 times 5. We change that percent into a decimal, into its value, which isn't 3, it's 3/100ths. Now I can type that into my calculator once I've shown my work what I'm multiplying. So 2,000 times 0.03 or 3/100 times 5 is 300. So the bond will earn $300 in interest after 5 years, or the other way you could write that is that I equals $300. Don't forget the dollar sign, that's your label here as your answer. All right, now in most problems, we don't want just the interest. We want to know how much interest was made, but then also what your balance is at the end. And if you remember back to our first page when we were talking about these vocab words, we talked about how the balance of the account is what you start with plus the interest that's made. So another way that you could write this equation is the account balance, the ending amount, is the principal, what you started with, plus the interest that you made. And so many of the problems ask us to find the interest, but also to find the balance of the account. So there's actually two answers to our problem. So number 3, we have that the principal, what we start with is $500, the rate is 7%, and the time is 4 years. So I start with my equation, I equals PRT. So the interest in this case would be 500 times 7% times 4 years. And remember, before I start multiplying, I can't multiply by 7 because 7% does not have the value of 7. It's actually 7/100, or 7/100 times 4. And now we can type this into my calculator. 500 times 7/100 times 4 gives us an interest of $140. Again, don't forget that dollar sign. We want to box that because that's the first part of our answer. It asked us to find the interest, but we're not done yet because the second thing it asked us to find was the balance of the account. Well, the balance of the account is what you started with plus how much interest you made. So in this problem, I put $500 into the bank, or whatever my investment was, and I made $140 of interest, so my account balance at the end would be $640. You need both those parts in your answer. Now, as we move over to number 4 and you look at the information that you've been given, the principal is $2,500, the rate is 3%, and the time is 9 months. Something should jump out at you. And that is that our time has been given in months, not years. And so if I were to plug in to my equation, if I were just to do 2,500 times 3% times 9, that would be a problem because that would be insinuating that I had put the money into the account for 9 years, but it really wasn't 9 years, it was only 9 months. And so this is not going to work. Instead, I need to convert 9 months into years, which there's 12 months in a year, so this would be 9/12, which is 3/4 or 0.75. That's the amount of time. It's 3/4 of a year that money has been in the account. Now, also before I multiply, remember I need to change that percent to 0.03 or to 3/100 because the value of 3% is 3/100. And so this one, you'll notice you put in a decent amount of money, but you didn't leave it there very long. And so our interest is $56.25. That's the first part of our answer. And remember, our second part is we need to figure out our account balance. So we're going to add what we started with plus the interest that we made. In this problem, that would be $2,500 plus $56.25. And so the account balance would be $2,556.25. Don't forget to do both parts when it asks you to find both answers. All right, why don't you take a minute and try number 1. Pause the video, and when you've finished it, push play. So you'll notice that I plugged in the principal, the rate, and the time. When I multiply those together, the correct answer is that your interest is $180. This problem didn't ask us for the account balance, but if it had, we would have added $1,200 plus $180 to figure that out. Now, if you take a look at number 2, there will be some problems that look like this, where instead of giving you a situation like it did in number 1, it just gives you the facts that you need. And this problem wants you to figure out the account balance. Now, before you can figure out the account balance, you need another piece of information. You have to know the interest before you can figure out the account balance. So even though it doesn't directly ask me for the interest, that's the piece of information that I need to figure out first. So I'm going to plug in the pieces that I know, and I'm going to change 4% to 4/100ths and type that into my calculator. So the interest in this problem is $208. Now, what the problem was asking me for was the account balance, which I now can figure out now that I know the interest. It would be what I started with, $1,300 plus the interest, which is $208. So the account balance is $1,508 as my answer. All right, let's take a look at number 3. So number 3 is a little bit different because it gives us the account balance, it gives us the principal, what we're starting with, it gives us the rate, and we are looking this time for the time. So if we take our equation that we've been using, I equals PRT, and we plug in what we know. We don't know the interest, we do know the principal, we do know the rate, and we don't know the time. And so as you look here, you can see we have an issue because we have 2 variables that we don't know, and we don't know how to solve an equation that has 2 variables that we don't know. So we've got to do a little bit more thinking here to figure out how we could figure out one of these. So let's go to our other equation, which is A equals P plus I. And let's plug in here what we know. So our ending account balance is $1,116.50. Our starting amount is $1,100, and the interest is what we don't know. And so this equation we can solve. We can subtract 1,100 from each side and figure out that the interest is $16.50. And this makes sense. We know that if we started with 1,100 and we ended with 1,116.50, that 1650 represents the interest that was made. So we can come back to our starting equation, and now instead of having an I there, I can plug in 1650, which is what the interest is. All right, I also here then need to change my percent to the value that it is, which is 3/100ths. And now I have an equation that I can solve because I only have one variable that I don't know. So I'm going to start by multiplying 1,100 times 3/100ths, and that gives me 33. And now I have to think, okay, what operation's happening between the 33 and the t? It's multiplication. I undo multiplication with division. So I have sort of run out of space here. I'm going to come over here. So I'm going to divide each side by 33. And I'm going to get a decimal. That's okay. It's not wrong to get a decimal. And this is that t equals 0.5. Now we're talking about time, so if you remember, our unit for time is always years. So you could write your answer as 0.5 years, or that's also equivalent to 6 months. So either way, your answer would work there. So even when we don't know t, we can still use the same equations to figure that out. All right. Why don't you take a minute now and pause the video and try number 5. All right, so go ahead and check your answers with what I did. I first figured out how much interest I made over here. And so I did that by subtracting what I ended with minus what I started with. So the interest is $37.50. So you'll notice that got plugged in there because, again, I'm using my equation, I equals PRT. And I plugged in P and I plugged in R, and then I solved for T. So the correct answer is T equals 0.25 years or 3 months. All right, now before you come to class, you should now try number 6 and number 9. Take a look and try those two. And if you get stuck, look back at past examples that we did.